Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new to this channel, my name is Frank Zhu and I'm a college professor teaching sociology, history and philosophy. I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. Aristotle famously said, "Man is by nature a social animal." What it means is that we live in communities with other people and depend on one another and interact with one another in order to survive and prosper. As a professor of sociology, it is my job to explain and teach students how to interact with other people appropriately. That is, how to understand others and make ourselves understood correctly. An essential part of social interaction is communication. Therefore, to be a good communicator is essentially important in our social interactions. We all know that communication is usually done verbally or non-verbally. Verbal communication is done by using spoken or written language, such as a conversation with the person next to you, exchanges of emails with your colleagues, or a telephone chat between you and a friend. Non-verbal communication, on the other hand, is carried out by means other than spoken or written language. In other words, we don't use words to convey our messages to each other. We already know the importance of verbal communication because we speak to each other, we send texts, we write emails, and we used to write letters. However, not everyone is fully aware of the important role of nonverbal communication in our lives. You will be surprised if I tell you that only 7% of all our messages and information is sent and received through words in our face-to-face communication. To put it another way, when we talk with each other face-to-face, what we say by mouth is actually not that important. What matters most is nonverbal communication, which is what I'm going to talk about in today's video. To better explain the important role of nonverbal communication, I'm going to break it down into several major forms and discuss how communication is done in each specific form. Number 1. Tactile communication, which simply refers to touching. It involves sending out messages through touch. Touching may be negative, like hitting, pushing, as well as positive, like shaking hands, hugging, and kissing. Tactile communication sounds simple, but be aware of its cultural and sexual sensitivities. An act of touching that is acceptable or necessary in one culture may be unacceptable in another culture. For example, handshaking is fine between males and females here in American culture, but it is not acceptable in some other cultures. Also, how you touch someone or how you are touched is strongly influenced by gender. For example, when parents touch their children, they touch a boy differently from a girl. Boys tend to be touched more roughly, whereas girls are more likely to be touched tenderly and protectively. Among individuals in everyday conversations, women touch each other much more often than men, at least according to my observations. Besides, the frequency with which we touch each other varies from culture to culture as well. According to research done in cafes around the world in the early 1980s, married couples in different countries touched each other with different frequencies. In Brazil, couples touched each other an average of 180 times within 1 hour. In France, it was 120 times an hour. In Great Britain, couples didn't touch at all for the whole hour. These findings correspond to many people's observations. Latinos are very outspoken and straightforward. The French people are romantic, and the British people are very conservative. The second major form of nonverbal communication is what we call paralinguistic communication. As the name suggests, it is related with words. However, in the sense of paralinguistic communication, it is not what we say that conveys important messages, but how we say it that is most important. Paralinguistic communication uses the pitch and loudness of the speaker's voice to convey meanings, such as rhythm, emphasis, frequency, and pauses. For example, there are many ways of saying the same word, goodbye, and how you say it sends different messages to the person you are saying goodbye to. It can be said in a passionate way, like goodbye, or it can be said in a very cold way, like goodbye. Depending on situations, the exact meaning of paralanguage varies. For example, I usually indicate to my students that something could appear on an exam by speaking very slowly or by taking a long pause. However, if a student speaks slowly or takes long pauses in a presentation, it may indicate uncertainty. In addition, the meaning of paralanguage may also vary from culture to culture. In Japan, long periods of silence often occur between people sitting on a commuter train, even though they know each other. Unlike Americans, Japanese people do not regard periods of silence as unpleasant or impolite. Rather, they regard it as desirable opportunities for collecting their thoughts. It also varies between the two genders. For example, a long period of silence often occurs among a group of men, but it rarely happens among women. A woman will regard it as weird if no one talks for more than just several seconds. They will feel embarrassed, and one of the women will surely start talking. There is another thing about paralinguistic form of nonverbal communication which we should be aware of. It often reveals our true feelings and thoughts. Oftentimes, even when we try to conceal or hide our emotions, they tend to leak out in a paralinguistic way. For example, people who are lying often betray themselves through paralinguistic expressions of anxiety, tension, and nervousness as they talk. Number 3, kinetic communication involves moving your body parts, such as gestures, facial expressions, and so-called body language. Waving hands, crossed arms, a raised fist, all transmit meanings. Facial expressions are most common and extremely expressive. Just like all the other nonverbal communication forms, kinetic communication is also gender-related. For example, women have been socialized to smile a lot, whereas men are supposed to avoid facial expressions that convey emotions. From my experience, this form of nonverbal communication is most often used by professors. Meanings conveyed by kinesis may also vary from culture to culture. If you ignore this, you may get yourself into trouble or misunderstanding. Eye contact, for example, is especially prone to misinterpretation. Chinese people generally avoid eye contact because they consider it as rude. Americans might interpret it as dishonest or evasive. The same is true with gestures. The hand gesture of OK in America does not have the same meaning in France, where it conveys the message that one is nothing, a zero. In Turkey, it suggests an undesirable sexual invitation. Number 4. Use of personal space is another way of getting across messages, which is done by the amount of space between interacting individuals. It is also referred to as proxemic communication. Generally speaking, the friendlier a person feels towards the other person, the closer he or she will stand. People who are sexually attracted to each other stand especially close to each other. Strangers usually keep bigger space between themselves. And it also varies from culture to culture. In Latin American cultures, for example, people generally keep a smaller space between each other, which I'm sure you have noticed among Latinos here in America. Number 5. Clothing is also a means of nonverbal communication, which relies on materials other than one's body. It is a form of communication that everyone engages on a daily basis. The types of clothing you wear send out wordless messages about your personality, background, and socioeconomic status. If you are always formally dressed, for example, you are most likely a business person or a supervisor at workplace. If you are casually dressed most of the time, but one day wears a suit, everybody will know that you are on your way to a job interview. To sum up, nonverbal communication is a crucial part of social interaction. It is crucial because it conveys information, reinforces spoken words, helps build relationships, and can clarify or contradict verbal messages. Furthermore, it also plays a vital role in expressing our underlying emotions and feelings, as well as understanding those of others. The important role it plays in face-to-face social interaction is probably beyond many people's imagination. In 1967, some researchers conducted an experiment on everyday communication situations. Their goal was to see how much of the communication was through facial expression, how much came through the context and the intonation, and how much of the meaning of the conversation was transmitted through language itself. Their research results showed that 55% of the meaning came through facial expression, 38% through intonation, and what was understood from the context. Only 7% of the meaning was transmitted through language itself. These results were amazing. They show that the words that are used in daily conversations are not as important as you may think. Well, I think that is all for today. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.